sides of the audio this time?
I checked it with Sniper yesterday, so yes. All right, so the recording's going there. And Hank's giving me a hard time, mostly because I put a thing in that blaming him for this. But last time when I did this, I had the wrong audio selected, so you could only hear me talk. But hopefully this time we'll hear everybody
I
else.
hope Mumble were going to hold up that with because we had all problems. I think I logged into the 7th time for now.
Yeah, there has been some issues.
Who was that just talking then? What's your name, sir? That one.
Yes, Lord Zizo.
Lord Caesar. Okay, he's roboting right now. Sorry, I'm going to find you and start tracking information on you.
The backup today, if we need it, is we can switch over to the university Discord. We're gonna try and keep it here, but if it does go down, we'll switch over there.
Okay.
Okay, so first question there, and it's a good one. Those asked there is why, right? What does Goons Forum have the reputation that it does? Well, if we go back to, 10 years ago, or a little bit more, we're gonna go back to 2010, right? Goons Forum, the height of its terrible, terrible reputation. The thing is that Goons Forum was complete bastards at the time. I mean, honestly, we would go out and there was recruitment scams running left and right from people in Goons Forum. And that was a classic one to where you would sit in some place like Jita and, you would have a corporation and they'd say, oh, this person wants to join, right? You're the recruiter, right? We'll put that in air quotes, the biggest air quotes. You're the recruiter. And what you're seeing is you would say, oh, well, we've got a jump freighter service and we can move all of your stuff out to our home, right? Wherever that home was, whether it was in Delve or it was in Deck or wherever it was at that point in time, it was mostly in Deck, 2010s, it was in Deck. And all we need from you is, a good faith deposit to make sure you're not going to join us and then, screw us like AWOXing kind of a thing. And it was usually a couple of 100 million ISK, and then you would get all of their stuff for our jump freighter service to move right to our capital, wherever the capital happened to be at that time. It was in YO, it was in VFK. It moved around a bit in Deck over the years. And what you would do is you would bring that person in, right? They would see all of this kind of stuff and they'd go, "Oh yeah, this is great. These guys are legit. They're really doing it." And as soon as you got all of their stuff, you would kick them out of the corporation and block them. And Goons used to do that a lot. If you ever want to reach into the Empires of Eve, I mentioned this on the last one when we did this a few weeks ago. Excellent books. They are actually hardbound books. Those are the version that I've got. There's electronic versions of it as well. Somebody linked it in Fleet. It's literally called Empires of Eve. There are 2 volumes of that now. Hargoth, who led to the discovery, right, and the downfall of one of our greatest enemies, was a recruitment scam guy. He knew he was being scammed, but decided, I kind of like the goons, the Goonie culture. You all are kind of cool, good guys. And that's how it happened. That's how we actually flipped Hargoth, is he was actually a recruitment scam person. But that corporation at the time brought him in, and I think he was in like 2 or 3 weeks trying to gain his confidence to steal all of his stuff. And as they went to go and kick him, that's when he admitted that he had a full director character in our greatest enemy of all time. And if you want to hear the really good history of that, Mittens gave a talk at Eve Vegas, and I believe it was 2017, 2016, 2017, something like that. He went over this entire story from his perspective. Now, he was involved with this at the time. I was not. I was playing Eve, but I was not actually involved with it. But yeah, so that's a classic recruitment scam. The reputation we gained was before things like the Ice Interdiction campaign, Hulkageddon. Those 2 things together became Burn Jita. We did a Burn Amar one year as well, but it was basically just you're in a freighter, you're in a jump freighter, orcas too sometimes, mostly freighters and jump freighters, and we don't like you, and we're gonna kill you. And what did you need to be not liked? You had to be not a goon, right? Basically, or in the CFC. It was the CFC at that time. The Imperium hadn't been created yet. But that's the short version. So recruitment scams, doing all those kind of things, ganking anybody that we felt like it. That's a lot of where that history came from of, why goons were such evil, horrible people. Um, I actually did get ganked during the original Ice Interdiction campaign myself by the evil Goonies. I could actually look up that kill mail. It's still on my kill board from years ago. I lost an Orca to it, and I thought I was smarter than the Goonies at that point in time. I think I bulkheaded it, and it just meant they used like 10 extra catalysts or something like that.
I'd like to add to that list Digital
Please.
Ebola. Digital Ebola is another reason goons are not really liked, and then something Wizard Head.
I mean, sure. There's stories you go back with different pieces at different times, but the big one in high sec that used to get us is the recruitment scams. People used to do those all the time, and the Burn Jita, Hulkageddon, all that kind of stuff. So that's the short answer of why we're hated. If you really want the fully long one, as was LinkedIn Fleet, do check out the Empires of Eve. The guy who wrote that book, again, there's 2 volumes of it, did a really good job in my opinion. He's about as neutral as you can possibly be when talking about like Eve history. It's not propaganda for us. It's not propaganda against us. He did an excellent job, I believe.
If you go look at the first chapter of Empires, he talks about the history of the CFC and the Russians, and the last chapter describes us as a group of scammers, grievers, and spies that call themselves goons. So the history goes back even further than that.
Yeah. I
it
was
does.
gonna say, hey Ranger. Uh,
Now, Kaz was involved when those early times. So, Kaz, we're just
well,
swapping stories of the before times.
so my group of World of Warcraft refugees joined up in 2010, immediately after the original edition of Goonswarm had essentially lost all of their stuff, and they were camped out on the Northern Coalition's space couch in Declan. But like this does go back even farther. Right? On the one hand, the goons before that time, especially, were super toxic to just tons of people within the game across a variety of ways. But they were also, the in the early days, Band of Brothers, our opponents at the time, who some of those guys later evolved into what is currently NC Dot, right? But in the early days, they dominated more than half of the map. Really, they were the OG Eve players. These were the people who had had someone get caught cheating with a developer. They were equally toxic, but not in the same way. Their posts were super e-honor. They treated all of their people like crap. They invented renting, right? Like one of their leaders was the guy who invented renting in the first place. That's how they ended up controlling the map. This is what the original Great War was fought over, was can they actually defend these renter regions that they hold so many of? And it turned out that they couldn't, because none of those pets were competent, right? So goons in contrast.
So the thing that he was talking about that Kaz just mentioned with the developer, that was the T20 scandal. If you want to look that
right,
up,
yeah.
That's what that was.
So very old now, like 17 years odd. And so goons, in contrast, saw themselves that, yes, they were extremely toxic in ways that we cultural revolutioned ourselves out of, probably 10 years ago at this point, but also saw themselves as just not respecting the current overlords of Eve, who had made it into a super e-honor bound place. Like, you go back to the forums 15 years ago, odd, in the 2004, 5, 6 era, and the way Band of Brothers treated people with just, you think Goblins and PanFam are bad, like, holy, I mean, these guys invented it originally, right? So there's just a long and deep history there of why people behave the way they did.
And as Kaz is just saying, and I mentioned as well, we have hated Bob and the successor organizations of Bob for almost 20 years now, right? It's coming up on that kind of anniversary, which is crazy to think of. Bob collapsed, right? It morphed into this next group, then the next group, then the next group, and each time they change, we simply just shoot them with a new iteration. So some of the old Bob people are in PL, some of them are in Horde, some of them are in NC Dot, some of them don't play anymore. Um, I mentioned the invasion against IT. It's again literally the letters IT Alliance. They held Fountain at the founding of the CFC. That was a Bob holdover as well. That was run
Yeah,
by
yeah,
a guy
that
named
was that was
Somali.
definitely IT was
And
the next direct incarnation of Bob for sure. PL really evolved separately. PL was originally part of the people that overthrew Bob in 2009 with the best. It was called the Best Friends Forever Coalition. It was us, PL, a bunch of Russians, and the Northern Coalition. And
Yeah, we were actually
the
allied to PL at that point in time. Believe it or not,
right, yeah,
everybody,
and
PL were our friends.
they ended up taking Fountain after the original Great War, right? And when Goons settled in Delve in 2009, they settled in Fountain, but they got tossed out of Fountain by IT first. There was a battle called YTAC 2 ANO. I'm sure the system name is familiar. And it was going to be a big super cap fight, and PL jumped all of their supers in, and they all failed to load grid. Stop me if this sounds familiar. So that was when they got the hell out of there and started recruiting and building more super caps and essentially became mercenaries, and they weren't our friends anymore and essentially stabbed us in the back later a couple times over the course of 2010 and 2011. And so they became, really blood enemies. So later, as IT becomes NC Dot, or what remains of IT became NC Dot, they always ended up working together, and thus PanFam was born, right?
Yeah, or what would become PanFam. They went through a lot of names. I know this war you had won Eve and already left. This was the Test war with N3 that we fought, where Test was actually living in Fountain at the time. Um, that was that was an interesting war to go through. Yep, Somali was head of IT. If you guys want to go and see, and I warn you right out, flat out, everybody, that propaganda from IT, especially with Somali, is like cringe of the highest order. But they are.
is sorry to interrupt. Is
Yes, go ahead.
Molly still playing?
I honestly don't know if he is still around. Does anybody actually know if he is actually
Not
still
in
active?
not in any sort of role. They occasionally ping that like, oh, Sir Molly will log in once a year, but he's not active.
Okay.
Yeah, I haven't seen him do anything really since basically IT fell. So almost 10 years.
He was in local for the M2 timers.
Yeah, I believe that. Mhm.
Yeah, I could see that too.
Well,
Doesn't he have the
how
record
should
for
I
most
say?
Titans Plus?
I only play since 2010, so that's 13 years. But I didn't start in Eve. Didn't start Eve with Goonsam Federation. I went all around already.
Yep.
You say only 13 years like it's no big deal.
Like John Region Federation for 8, and then a few years in Providence. That is how I came into Nullsec.
Yeah. So Providence, that's a fun one. So when
CVA.
Yep, CVA. If you were a role player in Eve in the 2010s, you were basically in Providence, or you were at some of the low sec faction warfare guys. But CVA was a big one with that. And the faction Fortizars, I mentioned these last time we did this. If you're undocked in 1DQ, right, and you're looking at the faction Fortizars that we have on grid here, these are named right after some of our historical systems that we wanted to memorialize. We tried as much as possible to get the actual fort that was in that system, but these were outposts at the time, right? Player built outposts. One of the changes when CCP announced that outposts were going to be converted to the faction forts, again, that you can see on the undock right here, Providence, everybody looked right at Providence and said, mine. They were invaded by 5, 6, 7, 10 different groups. Everybody was in there because here's the thing. If you controlled the outpost when it was changed, then that Fortizar became yours, right? That was now your Fortizar. So everybody just bum rushed Providence and crushed the locals. There was a question in Fleet there. Oh, wasn't that during Vietnam? I'm not sure which.
That was
I
that was about Mali. Yeah, if anything,
Oh,
he was
okay,
back then. Yeah, so all of our faction forts came from a deal. We were at war in the north and had sent half of PanFam packing, and were about to clean up an alliance led by Sword Dragon called Guardians of the Galaxy, or a sub-coalition. And to buy what he thought he was doing was buying time to flee and regroup with the rest of PanFam, the people who had led the casino war against us. And he bought off Aerith and Mittani together by giving us a bunch of the faction forts that had originally been the Declan outposts, which we had lost just a couple years beforehand in the casino war. So it was pretty good bait, right? You know, we like those. They're a good trophy. They're still sitting there. They're cool. But the rest of PanFam did not buy that. They thought that he was saving his own ass at the cost of them, and so they just let his coalition die later anyway, and did not, he did not continue to play with them or help them. And so it was great for us and bad for everyone else. And they lost more Titans later in the next war we had. It was a good time.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
GMTG
it did.
war. Yeah, go
Excuse
ahead.
me that I have to ask so many questions because I'm so much interested in that. During my flights to Fountain, I sometimes see a group. They are called like you, Goon Swarm, but with a goon and then new word swarm in a big S. But it has the same thing as you.
Okay.
It's like I don't know who they are. Also
Yeah, and it has a little different logo. So that is the original Goon Swarm Alliance. That's the one that Goons used all the way through the beginning of 2010 after the Great War. And then at the beginning of 2010, this is how Goons lost everything. Their CEO was not paying attention. Their CFO failed to pay the SOV bills on time when the new SOV system came out. And then the CEO, when this was Cartoon was his name, he was getting made fun of on the forums for all of this, and he ended up stealing everything and quit and took the alliance with him. And so that's why we have a new one now. That was founded in 2010, right before I joined.
How you mean he took everything?
Yeah, I mean, he stole as much as he
literally
could.
emptied everything.
We got a lot of it, right? Because XTTZ and a couple other directors were online at the time and were suspicious, so we saved a lot of blueprints, a lot of capitals, a lot of caches. But yeah, he stole a ton of stuff. So that original alliance though survived. He ended up selling it to Penif Smash, who is an ex-goon that joined PL and is now in Snuff. And a few random PvP people have continued to use it as like an alt alliance. So they are not friendly. If you see anyone in there, they're
If we can see
definitely they should not be blue to us. Yes.
okay.
John, I'm not sure what you mean there. You say saved from enemy forces, but I'm not sure what you mean by that, man.
Save the blueprints.
Oh, yeah. So the thing to remember too, guys, when you go through, this was part of the T20 scandal, right, of the 2000s itself. The invention system that we use today didn't exist back then, right? There were T2 BPOs. They still exist, right? Those of you who were on the some of the recovery, let's call them recovery ops in Pakvin the last couple of weeks, saw at least one of these T2 BPOs. The T20 scandal was involved with a Saber BPO.
Yeah, I just meant like capital stuff, right? We just, at the time the Cartoon stole things, he got a lot of stuff, but we managed to save enough to continue building caps and not lose the core of the Alliance in a lot of ways back in 2010 early.
Yeah, so it's just something to keep in mind when you hear people talk about T2 BPOs, they come from that era.
Even earlier, really. So this is actually a common misconception. Invention was added in 2007, so T2 BPOs date to very early, like 2003 and 4, actually.
Yeah, I meant that original early era. Yeah, not when Cartoon did that, but they come from the original part of it. Yeah, Invention's been
the first
with
couple
us
years
for almost 20 years again, right? I mean, we're coming up on some of these 20-year anniversaries of this stuff.
Invention was in 2007, but what they did not do is they did not make it good until 2014 in Creus, and that's where they revamped a lot of stuff, including how ME&T work in industry, how Invention works, and made the Tech 2 BPOs less competitive.
So for those of you who are not aware of how Invention used to work, right, previously, right before the change that Kaz just mentioned, the ME and TE of the resultant T2 BPC was based on the ME and TE level of the BPO. It's not that way now, but it was back then. So you would get people, you'd say, oh, I'm going to invent, like, let's say you're going to do an invention on a Sabre BPO, or sorry, a Sabre. That's what you're trying to get. Well, the BPC that you would use for the invention had to have max ME and TE to get you the best possible results. And you would use max runs on them as well, because the run number on the BPC that you invented it from determined the run number when you were done. None of that's true now, but it was at that point in time. If you
There
guys want
is
a lot more detail on how, like, the invention and industry and all that stuff works, University's got a class on industry.
You can also come to me. I have 185 million skill points. I have about 700 blueprints that I collected over the years. It was a time where I built, except the rigs, my own Rockwell.
Yeah,
And I had
a lot of people
4.
have done that, yeah.
I even built the dreadnoughts for the Imperium, but God, now it's almost impossible.
So it's really, you're saying there are limited research and invention slots. Yeah, I mean, that's true if you're using like player outposts or pauses, especially. We're not great about that. The NPC
Yeah, crazy.
stations still had effectively unlimited ones, but it was interesting because you would go and you would start one. You could always tell when somebody had a whole bunch of blueprints, because when you went to start yours, you could see the start time on yours change depending on how many other people were doing them. So they were limited also in that sense, and you could actually delay the start of somebody else's job by putting in a whole bunch of jobs yourself. That was actually a thing you saw in the NPC stations. Speaking of job times, I told Apple I would tell this story here during the wars, during Vietnam. One of the things that we've had is, you probably have seen people talking about system index costs of late, because CCP changed that calculation not too long ago. Well, during the war, what some of our operatives totally did not do, right? I'm telling you guys right now, our Black Hand people totally did not do what I'm about to tell you that they did not do, okay? They totally didn't take a whole bunch of shuttle blueprints to an enemy structure and just start cranking build jobs in there to jack up their system index costs while they were trying to build dreadnoughts. They totally did not do that, guys. Right? That is absolutely a fake story that Apple did not want me to tell you.
Now, another question, and I would like to know, well, how should we say that? I don't want to sample and point fingers at people that maybe feel, how should we say, that are not here in the channel right now. But it would be still interesting for me to find out, why is that so? I've heard things about, well, I heard things about, what is that? The big boat basically caused a war or something like that, and like making a tactical error or something like that
So
by doing so.
Mischief?
yeah, Boat didn't cause the war. Boat is just being Boat. I think you're referring to the Asakai incident, and he jumped his Titan instead
Something
of
like
bridged.
that, yes.
Yeah, so he did not cause that war. That fighting was already going. He escalated one engagement because he accidentally, and at the time, guys, the thing to remember, at the time, the bridge and jump buttons were literally right next to each other on your capacitor. They were
Oh yeah.
right next to each other. So he accidentally, and this was a fairly common occurrence. You used to see this. It's a lot rarer now, but you used to see this quite a bit. And he accidentally jumped his Titan into Asakai instead of bridging the subcap fleet that was
My
there.
God. Oh,
So
basically,
I mean, yeah, he did not kick off that war. That
but
fighting
I
was
heard
already going.
but in the later report, it seemed that way. As I heard, Mitani demoted him.
So Boat got promoted and demoted more times than I can count. There's actually a picture if somebody wants to find it. It's on the forums, and it shows him, right, just a cartoon Boat in a captain's hat with like 5 wrecked cruise ships behind him, and they have names of different doctrines that he'd been promoted and then demoted keys on. So that's
Mhm.
that's a thing with Boat. It's kind of always been that way. One of the most famous lines from Boat on his fleets is, if you warp, you're dead. If you warped, you're dead. Because he would say, usually with bombers, he did this a lot with bombers. He'd be like, okay, align to this gate, take this warp, and then about 2 seconds later, it'd be, well, if you warped, you're dead, because he had warped you into a trap. Or smart
Yep.
bombs. One of our guys used to get pipe bombed all the time, and I spaced his name now, but it was almost every day. You'd wake up and you'd be like, and it became a meme in the channels. Is like, did he get pipe bombed today? I can't remember. Does anybody remember who that was?
Funny because I had always the experience flying with both fleets could be a little crazy, but on the other hand, it is a lot of fun.
I mean, Boat's a special kind of FC for it. When he does bombers and he's on his game, there's very few people who are better at bomber warfare than Boat is. But you take the good with the bad. If he's not on his game, he tends to whelp an entire bomber fleet.
So, funny story about Asakai, if anybody's willing to hear it here.
Yeah, go ahead. I mean, that's all we're doing today, guys. We're just chit-chatting about stories.
So, when
That's good.
Asakai originally happened way back when, I actually wasn't in Goons. I was in Pirates, in a low-sec pirate group. We were called Clone at the time. And we were actually based out of the Placid and Black Rise area. And I remember I was in what was I in? I think a Thrasher or something. We were coming back from just hunting around the nullsec when somebody mentioned there was a big fight next door. And I'm like, yeah, sure, let's go check it out. How big can it be? And I can't remember which system I jumped through, but I jumped a gate and suddenly just the whole game slowed down and it was a crawl. And it was the first time I ever experienced time dilation. And it turns out this whole thing, Asakai, was happening 2 jumps from us. So there I was in my Thrasher, hoping to just sneak on some kills, and it was absolute chaos.
Yeah.
Just an absolute nightmare. But I do remember trying to loot something out of a big ship, and funny story, I did see a Titan wreck. I went inside it, and it was mostly empty except for a few things. And one of the things I pulled out was actually a Sino module. Well, that might be useful later for something. I don't know. And no guarantees. It's been so long ago, but I think I might have the Sino that was fit to Boat's Titan at the time. It's still sitting in SS here in a cargo container. I set it to the side once I realized what I might have.
That's funny. Yeah, at that point in time, you could fit a Sino to any ship. Any ship could have a Sino on it. So carriers, dreads, right? There were no faxes at that point when we started with this, right? They started with the carriers and dreads and supers and titans. You could put a Sino on anything. You put them on battleships. And so that was a common thing. There would be a Sino in your fleet hangar on your cap or your cargo hold, just depending on where you put it. Most people put them in the fleet hangars just because they were bigger. But yeah, that was absolutely a thing. You would carry those things around, and you could have them.
But talking
yeah,
about
bait Sino
talking
ratting
up,
carriers, sure, that was a thing.
talking about interesting fleets or something like that, or battles that happened. When the bloodbath of BTEC happened, I was in the system, but I was on either sides. I came there because I forgot on my first bomber to put on a micro overdrive, and a friend told me that I should go there because nobody is actually in that system. What bad luck I had for the next 18 hours. And when I went out,
That's
I didn't
funny.
have like earphones like now. I had stereo here in my on my computer desk here.
Yeah,
And when I
so BTEC-R, you remember Kaz mentioned somebody not paying a SOV bill? That's what triggered the Battle of BTEC-R. Again, we talked about this last time. It's been all the history books. CCP says that the button was not clicked, right? The enemy says that it was, and there was something with it, but whatever the reason, The
It was one of
Sov,
the N3 alliances drop Sov, yeah.
yeah, the Sov in BTACR dropped, right? For whatever reason, it just dropped for it. And that's what caused that battle. Now the war was already going. It's not like that triggered the Halloween War is what we call it. That war was already going. The BTACR occurred because of that drop Sov. And then we sat there, did it, and we camped that station, right? This was the Hell camps if you were on the M2 camp where we were sitting there, right, following the armor timers and everything. We had everything just sitting there waiting for them to log in. We did
I was
that.
sitting, excuse me, I was not finished. I was sitting 1,000 miles over the CFC fleet cloaked. And I could skill my cloaking device to level 3. And then after 18 hours, I naturally fell asleep on my computer. And the next day I went on and I said, where are all the ships? And I flew home. I was living in Providence at the time.
Yep. Yeah, that
Now
was the
I'm
thing.
finished.
And that was something too with the camps that we ran, right? Because in M2 you couldn't drone bunny them like you could during the Halloween War. Those of you who remember this, there were no limits to there was no practical limit to the number of drones that you could drone bunny to somebody. It was the fact that there was 256 people in a fleet and you could drone bunny them to other members of your fleet. So during that camp, what we would do is we'd put we called them boot carriers. We also used boot dummies as well, and you would sit them there with sentries, as was just mentioned here with these drones. You would log in, you would find who the FC or the drone bunny, we call them drone bunnies, usually somebody with a fast locking ship that had a target painter. So a lot of times it was on a frigate, and you would just basically slave all of your drones to that person, and you'd go to work and you'd come home and you'd have like 200 kill mails because you could sit there and do that literally all day. They would undock a ship, the drone buddy would lock them, and then every drone in 250 sets of sentries would fire on it, and you could nearly insta pop like caps doing that pretty effectively.
I heard also again a question about maybe very simple. Is it true? Is it not true? If a Titan in those days shoots, then 256 ships are completely gone.
So not at
In one
that,
in charge.
yeah, it's not
Both
at that
told
point.
about that.
It was before. That's the old area effect Doomsday that could be fired through Sinos. You could do that. You could wipe an entire
Really?
fleet. Yeah. But at this point in time, Doomsdays were point targets, right? You would target a single ship with it. Now you could target subcaps. That was a thing. You could DD subcaps at that point, but they weren't area effect. Yeah, the area effect thing that's talking about in Fleet right now, that should be in Empires of Eve Volume 1 is where the area effect version of the Titans was. The bigger issue at this point was what we called turret Titans. And they had tracking high enough that you could actually shoot frigates with Titan guns. And they were called turret tracking, or they were called turret Titans.
And the question is, I don't want to be the only one man talking here. I'm waiting all the time until somebody else tells an interesting story. But apparently I have so many questions that I don't know that I would like to be answered if we are already here.
I got something.
Yeah, go ahead, Andy.
Okay.
What we're talking about, area of effect Doomsdays. Who wants to talk about the time some Russian went up to Mittani talking about cutting somebody's power to trap a Titan?
Yeah,
I heard.
Who wants to tell that story?
Yeah, that's a real story.
I heard before Fosisov existed, there was something like, how did you manage to get a system in the old days?
Sorry, I missed that about Fosisov.
How did you conquer a system before anybody could take a system like now?
So I mean, it's at that point. So this is Dominion is the one that I'm familiar with because that's what we play when I started. You would use SBUs, and it was so an SBU is known as a sovereignty blockade unit, and what it would do is you would put them on gates. So if you had 5 gates in a system, you had to have 3 of them that had your SBU on it. It had to be a majority of it.
Oh, good.
And that would allow the system to become reinforced.
Wasn't it also somehow tied to the POS system?
So the pauses determined who had SOV in there, and you could then go in and attack like TCUs and iHubs and all these kind of pieces. So the pauses was a thing, but it wasn't. You didn't have to kill the pauses to siege a system. The SBUs would let you do that.
Okay.
But the pauses were tied into it as well.
That means only big fleets could done it.
To a certain extent, that's true. There was a lot of hit points on like SBUs and iHubs and outposts. So you would go and you would shoot them. And like on an outpost, for instance, you couldn't kill outposts. They were non-destructible once they were built and in place. You couldn't remove them. I mean, CCP could, of course. They had the magic button, but players couldn't. You would push them through their reinforcement timers, and the person whose shot pushed it into the claim, that person's alliance then controlled the outpost. So when you would attack an outpost, if you had like the Imperium, like today, like it was called the CFC at the time, but if you had the Imperium today, and we were attacking something, and you wanted it to be under TNT control or lawn control or goon swarm, it had to be just that alliance that did the final shot. Because if you had like, okay, we want this outpost under GSF control, and a TNT guy got the final shot into it, it would go to TNT. That it was determined by the last person's shots alliance. That's how that was done. It wasn't done by like damage percentage. Nope. It was okay. He gets to this magic point, and then you would hear on comms, everybody but insert this alliance stop shooting because they needed to get that alliance to take control of it. And that's
Okay.
that's how it was done.
Complicated, it sounds. It's not today with the nodes. It was
Yeah, those didn't exist. That's again, formerly the system we use now is called Aegis Sov. We all call it Fozzie Sov, but it's technically
Yes,
called Aegis
it's
Sov.
just
Infleet is a kill mail from one of the old iHubs.
uh-huh.
I will pull that up so those of you who are watching it now on screen can actually see it.
Where
Dear
did
God,
you
dude,
post?
did that
Where
with a
did you post?
saber?
You
Jesus.
posted?
It was me.
Sorry?
It was my dad.
I am not in the fleet. I just came into the channel.
Let's see, Archie, can you drive that into local?
Local? Yeah, sure.
The problem is I'm not in the 1DQ system. I'm someplace else.
Well, when we get to like, I'll post these recordings. You can look at it there. I guess Archie, you can put it in Alliance. That would work too. The iHubs. This was something we used to go and do.
Oh, I know those. They're all over the place.
Well, but that's the old mode. This is the old one where you had to go and shoot it with like an actual gun or a fighter. I'm stunned he did that with a saber. Yeah, because that's a hell of a lot of ammo. Normally you use an entire fleet.
This kill mail actually has a story if you want to
right.
listen
Yeah,
to it.
tell us a story on that one.
So, if I recall correctly, that told me that I think a Gun mothership fleet was trying to kill NC's iHub.
Okay, just one second. For those of you who aren't familiar, motherships were the original name of super carriers. We call them super carriers now. They're called motherships originally.
Okay.
Yeah, so a fleet of GSF supers were trying to kill iHub. And then they got spooked by, I think, a fleet of Dictors, and they quickly fled and left the system. And so a lone saber was left to finish the iHub. It was very low in structure when the supers warped off, so the saber finished the job.
Be right back. Now you have a chance.
Oh, that's interesting.
It took him half an hour to finish the job, though. But so iHub kill mail, yeah.
That's interesting. A lot of times we would do this with, sure, you'd use supers, you could use regular carriers. We used to use siege bombers with it, which were just torp bombers. So they didn't have a bomb launcher on it, or it would be offline. They'd be high DPS torp bombers. That's what we used to use. Use that a lot. I was on a fleet. I told this story last time with Asher, and we actually used we used siege bombers to push an outpost into final reinforce. Because of a very similar situation to what you were just describing, the fleet had to pull back, like the heavy guys had to pull back for something. They had to hit another target, or like enemies got put into position. I don't remember what it was so many years ago, but we actually managed to do it with torque bombers. We couldn't believe it. We were stunned. Because again, we had to hit it with just GSF bombers because we were trying to push that outpost into GSF. Let's see. Anybody have any kind of pieces? We're kind of bouncing all over the place. Didn't have a big plan to this. I've got a couple more stories that I want to tell you. So if you've got something that
Just
you
really quick, completely unrelated. I
go
gotta
ahead.
call it a day here because I work graveyards. But assuming this is being recorded, where can I find the recording once this is put up?
So I'm going to put it up on YouTube, and there will be a link in Gooniversity. So there will be a post in the forums that say, you know, from here go to this link, and it'll take you right to the YouTube video because I am recording it right now.
Okay.
So fun story for you all from when I first started. I was brand new, was going through, didn't really know what I was doing, and the money, right, the ISK was so tight back at that point in time. I went to my CEO, who, again, I told this story last week or last time. If you guys want to go and listen to this piece, he was the scammer guy who was really good at infiltrating corps and was a scammer. He would probably be a really good Black Hand and Insurgent Squad agent if he was with us, but he's not. Anyways, I went to him and needed a loan, and I kid you guys not, because I had gotten killed by the NPCs doing something. You know, ratting, mission running, something like that. And I didn't have enough money to buy a new ship. So I got a loan from him for 5 million ISK. I kid you guys not. 5 million ISK. Took me 3 weeks to repay it because I didn't know what I was doing and how to make money at that point in time. And this would have been late 2009. But imagine that kind of piece is, you know, you got a 5 million ISK loan, and it literally took me over 3 weeks to pay him back 5 million ISK. It's just a crazy thing. During those, wow. All right, that's a big wall of text there. Let me read that. Yeah. So fuel was an interesting thing during Vietnam when the enemy was pulling back, right? So they had realized they can't win. They're unanchoring those keeps in T5Z. I actually had a really long conversation with PGL about this a couple of weeks ago. He was at a goon meet with me, and I got a chance to hear that story of how that all went down from his perspective. It was interesting. It was a little subtly different than what we had, or at least I had always believed. But it was really interesting to just hear it from his side. But anyways, what we did is we had Black Hand agents don't do this. And I want to make this clear to everybody. Black Hand agents don't do the kind of crazy thing that we're talking about. This is the Insurgent Squad agents who do this. So the IS guys are the ones who, you know, AWACS, Horde and Frad and whoever it is, you know, and go in and screw with markets and all kinds of stuff. The Black Hand agents are there to gather intelligence for us. So you will never see Black Hand agents acting overtly like this. That's not their role. IS agents do that. If you're interested in either of those two things, you should reach out and talk to Apple Pear. He runs both the Black Hand and Insurgent Squad. But anyways, what Insurgent Squad did is they went in and started buying all of the isotopes on the market. Sometimes they would relist it for, you know, 5, 6, 7 times the price they paid for it. But they just bought it all out. And sometimes they just kept it. They cleared out T5Z. T5Z did not have any isotopes in it because the Insurgent Squad guys all logged in and they were competing with each other to see who could buy the most amount of isotopes. And I know you all won't believe me, but completely coincidentally, it wasn't an IS guy who did this. It was just some goon who heard about it, went to Jeddah, and bought everything out there too. So they could not refuel their ships. And they actually triggered a galaxy-wide fuel crisis when they withdrew because they didn't lay in supplies along the jump route and NT5Z. And one of our wonderful fuelers is in fleet right now here. Nemus is here. If you all put in a fuel contract in 1DQ or DO6, Nemus is like 99% the person who filled that for you. And so what we do, right, when like the mill director says, hey, we're going to move the Cap fleet over to insert name of system. Let's say we're going to move it to D. I'm not even going to say it. We're not moving the Cap fleet here, right? So they come and say, hey, we're going to move it over there. And then I lay in a supply for it so that when you all arrive, assuming that Nemus is on top of things as per usual, their alt is there and ready to fill those contracts. The enemy had not done this. And so everybody was on their own, paying whatever price they could get to get isotopes. The IS guys cleared serious money because they were starting to go, oh, well, I wonder if I can get them to buy isotopes. Like I bought them at 500 ISKA unit. I wonder if they'll buy it at 2,000 ISKA unit. The answer was yes, they were. And you needed a huge amount to get from T5Z all the way back like into the drone lands. I don't even remember how many hundreds of thousands of topes it was, but it was a lot for every ship. Let me see. So what ended up happening to the technetium bottleneck? So that was the old tech cartel, and it was a critical component in T2 production at the time. We made a agreement between goons and several of the major powers at the time to control the amount of technetium. It was based on the OPEC model in the real world, right, where OPEC says how much can be produced of oil. Sorry, give me just a second here, guys. So how much the like oil production is, and that's what this cartel was that we created here in EVE. It was just based on technetium. To push the price of the technetium up, we lowered the quantity that we would sell, and that's what that agreement did. Eventually, CCP rejiggered where the moons were, that the moons were reshuffled, the requirements for production were changed, so that technetium bottleneck isn't a thing anymore, but it was at that point in time. Mach 1, I honestly don't remember the name of the group that set up that bait sino along their route, but it was brilliant. There were two systems that had like the exact same name, but they had the hyphen in a different place. So it was like FM TAC and FTAC M. And one was their bait sino that they just renamed. Yeah, it was something like that. UQ TAC. Yeah, that's it. Zops. That's it right there. UQ TAC and UTAC Q. One of them was on their route, and one of them they set up a bait sino, actually on a pause. It was actually on a pause, and they would just sit there and pick them off. And they got a little bit of everything. There were carriers, there were jump freighters, there were dreadnoughts. Faxes did exist then. There were faxes on there. I mean, pretty much you name it, they got it there. If it was a cap ship, they didn't really get too many subcaps. They did get a couple of like blops, like redeemers and stuff, because they could jump themselves. But they would send out pings and say, hey, stop doing this, right? Jump to the sinos and the MOTDs of the fleet, and people were still jumping from their capacitors, which is why if you have a cap ship, don't jump from your capacitor. Always use sinos that are linked in the MOTDs by the FCs.
What kind of name did Goonswarm have before? Because when you go into the old characters of the game, you see something like a very long name that was existing one day, and then it changed into Goonswarm the next day, like Solo Lodo, something like that. It stands there as a, how should I say, execute a corporation or something like that.
Yeah, so Solo Drakman was the
Yes.
executor at one point in time. You know, that's so those names come from that point, and you still see them referenced on our forums today. You'll see little references to some of the old people with that. But as Kaz mentioned, right, when the Alliance Executor, right, cartoon kind of flipped the table and took everything, he took the name with him because he had control of the Alliance Executor Court. And so when it was reformed, right, you get name changes like that. That happens.
And the other one is, what's the real name of what does CFC mean?
So that stands for Clusterfuck Coalition.
Oh, naturally. Naturally.
Yeah, that's
So
what that was called at that time. And so we rebranded from the kind of the original name was Deco that preceded CFC. Because we lived in, right, Goons lived in Declan at the time, so it's like the Declan Cooperation or something like that. Got changed to the CFC, and then that was changed to the Imperium. I'm spacing now when that was rebranded. Does anybody remember what year we rebranded from the CFC to the Imperium?
And what is the Kickstarter? What exactly?
It was after BTEC-R, I believe, straight afterwards, because we hit BBC News and couldn't have our alliance name or Imperium Coalition actually read out as the CFC at the time.
Okay.
That sounds about right. So, yeah, right after BTEC-R, I can see that. So that would have been, oh my god, I'm spacing dates. How much was that? 18 then? When was BTEC-R?
Yeah, I think it was 2018ish.
So BTEC-R was in the spring. It was in like January, but I think it was January of 18.
No, BTEC-R could have been 2018. It
Was it
before
17
that.
then?
No, I think it had to be earlier than 2016.
Oh, it's 2013.
Oh my god, BTEC-R goes no.
Yeah,
it is, because there was a thing on the forum about it being 10 years since it, and someone's making a documentary about it.
Wow. Damn,
I'm sticking the BBC article in Elysium
time.
now. Yeah.
Havish, can you put it in?
I'm writing a book about
Are
that.
you in Fleet?
I'm not in Fleet. I've just dunked it in Elysium.
Okay, I'll copy and put it into Fleet here, so we've got it for everybody.
Can you guys please stop making me feel old?
Feel old? What do you mean with?
Yeah. Speaking of how long ago years are, I'm starting to feel old now.
And what is about that guy? I heard rumors about there was somebody with a, like, how should I say, pink elephant in the room.
I don't know what you're talking about there, man. There's
a corporation or whatever it is that like a character, and he had like an elephant in the back of his.
I honestly don't know on that one, man.
Okay.
We've got so many people who do weird meme things and corporations and everything. I could not tell you that specific one. Okay, so we're just kind of going through all these fun bits. Wars. This was one of the really, it's one, as you look at the invasions of Fountain, like we invaded it more than once. I told you all we did against IT, right? You heard Kaz talking about them as successor to Bomb.
So it was Test Alliance.
Well, no, IT held, well, the first one where the CFC was created was against the IT Alliance. That's actually where the CFC was created. And this was a really great, I told part of the story last time, but I'll tell you a different piece of this. So I was flying a Wolf. This is an assault frigate. We used assault frigates for tackle at that point in time. We had formed up our fleets. We were going to invade 6 VDT, was IT's capital at the time. Admittance gets on to talk to us about the war. He gave a little speech, and then there was going to be Q&A time. We all knew that it was going to be speech, Q&A time. That's kind of the rule on how it would work. Well, there were enemy spies. So there were enemy spies in our comms, and what ended up happening is Mittens said, "Oh, we're going to go invade 6 VDT." Well, the enemy spies in our comms heard that. They relayed it to their leadership. They started a mass panic and got ready to withdraw from 6 VDT, right? They were trying to evacuate. So I remember sitting on I remember sitting on comms and Mittens is like, okay, well, since we've got spies here, we're going to go now. And so every fleet just left to do this invasion because we were trying to get there before they could evac out. And so we're just piling everybody into the system. And this is the story that I told last time. We were sitting there and an entire Cap and Super fleet jumped in, and it was all hostiles. There was not a single blue in the entire fleet. We kind of panicked a little bit, I'll admit. We're just like, oh, that's not good. Because this is before tie-dye. Tie-dye didn't exist then.
And it was not tie-dye. Yeah, I remember that
No.
times.
Yeah, there was no tie-dye
You
then.
could jump around like mad.
And the settings that you could see on your overview was the security status of them. So they were all yellow, they were all reds, because their security status was the only thing that the servers were processing. None of the other standings were. You couldn't even tell they were in your corporation, but the security status showed up. So
great.
we nearly attacked our own Cap fleet because that's all we could see.
Oh man.
Right, we could only see the security status of them. We could not see alliance, corporation, affiliates, right? You know, if you right clicked on them and did a show info, you could of course see it, but none of us were doing that. So when we took Fountain then from IT, Test ended up moving in there, as well as an alliance called Fatal Ascension. I was part of Fatal Ascension at that time when we were doing this piece. I left Fatal Ascension not too long after that. But I was with them. I joined TNT at that point in time. And then the whole system, right? They were in it. They were going through everything. But when I was in Fatal Ascension, I think you guys will love this. If you don't know who Rooks and Kings are, so Rooks and Kings.
Yes, that's something I heard. I didn't know who they were.
They were an alliance. You should look up their videos on YouTube.
Yeah.
We were in a RNK. That was their basically ticker. R lowercase n capital K. We were doing a move up. We were doing a supply run. This is again, I was in Fatal Ascension at the time, and we were moving. I think we had 10 freighters worth of stuff to move just one jump. We were in a high sec area. We were moving at one jump into low sec, and then bridge it back into Cloud Ring. Fatal Ascension lived in Cloud Ring at that point in time, and we were sitting there going through it. I was the scout. I was literally sitting in high sec. I couldn't believe it. DFC asked for a volunteer. I said, because he wanted somebody in a fast tackle. I said, sure, I'll do it. And he said, go through the gate, sit in high sec, and just watch it. So the video of them ambushing our freighters, I'm there, but I'm on the other side of the gate in the high sec watching that side. And you can look up this video of it, and it says, you know, they just crushed this fleet. They also have one of the best videos ever is the video where they used a Hictor on a pause because, let me step back.
False tower.
Yep, at the time, it was a false tower. I mean, it was a real tower, but what they did is they put a Hictor right on top of the model of the tower itself, right? A lot of people call them sticks. With the bubble up, they are the same color as a pause shield. Now, they're different now, but at that point in time, they were this kind of bluish color. And if you expect to see a shield on a tower, you didn't notice that it was a slightly different blue. They weren't technically the same color, but they were so close that if they weren't next to each other, you couldn't tell them apart. All right, so is that why they're different colors now? Yeah, they're different colors now. So Hictor bubbles, pause shields, Dictor bubbles, they were all the same blue, just with a slightly different shade. It was very, very subtle. And what they did is they put that ship there, they put the Hictor bubble up, and they put their fleet inside that Hictor bubble and baited an enemy fleet into engagement range. The fleet's like, well, they gotta come out to get us, and they don't, and they smash them from within a shield, which you're not supposed to do because you can't lock into it, but it wasn't a shield, it was a Hictor bubble. I will be right back, guys. I gotta go let a puppy dog out, so give me just 1 second.
Okay.
You got to remember this is in the days when FCs could be headshot, so imagine if they just took out the whole command and control team of a fleet.
So a missed fleet.
I won't tell him you said that.
I missed the first one of these. Did you guys cover pulse bowling already?
Ask Ranger in a second. He's gone for a dog letting out session.
Okay, sorry about that. So yeah, if you want to look at that video, you should. It's called like the False Tower or something like that. It's a great one. You can just YouTube that.
Yes, I know that one. The False Tower from the Overlords of Providence. Yes, I know that one.
Oh, linked above. Perfect. The setup then is you're going through them now. If you use a Hictor bubble or a Dictor bubble and pause shields now, they're different colors. And so as somebody mentioned in Fleet, is that why they're different colors? Yep. That's where that came from, because they were all the very, very similar blue at that point in time. Okay, so through the war in Vietnam there, right? So the one that started in 2020. I went and looked up the dates because we were talking about how all of these things happened, when everything started, all these kind of pieces. And I promised Ankh I would give you guys a little bit of kind of a behind the scenes thing on some of the operations that my group was involved with at the time, which was procurement. And so I looked up some of the things that we did and some of the operations that we were involved in. And so I thought I would tell you guys some of them. So we talked about the Feroxes, right? We put together Feroxes, we put them mostly in Fountain, right? These were the defense Feroxes for it. If any of you all were around for the NPC Delve Keepstar timers, do you remember the Ravens that were used, that were just kind of handed out? That was a procurement thing. We put all those together. And still to this day, if you go through and look at some of those pieces, one of my guys who put them all together swears to this day that it wasn't the hulls that was the problem. It was finding all the launchers. He spent hours along with one of the other directors flying around HiSec, grabbing launchers from every system he could possibly find to be able to fit them out. And I can't remember if we've ever actually released this number or not, but procurement fit out 2,000 Ravens for those NPC Delve timers. 2,000 of them.
Can I ask a question about that?
Sure, go ahead.
How do you get involved with procurement?
So procurement is a very closely guarded, hidden group. And so what we do is when we get ready to do a recruitment drive, it's not advertised really anywhere. It's something that usually you know that you're up in consideration for it when you get a PM from me telling you that we're looking at you to do something. It's just one of those things of it's a very closely guarded group because of all the information that the members have access to. And so it's something that you won't even know that you're in the running for until all of a sudden you get a DM will pop up from me and it says, "Hey, we're looking at you." And I'll admit, more than once I've had the person go, should I be scared? It's like, yeah, probably. But yeah, that's how it's done. It's a very closely guarded group. As I mentioned a few weeks ago, we don't acknowledge. There are 4 people we now acknowledge at our part of procurement because it's the 4 directors. So it's myself, Rat Knight, Zentar, and Harry. Those of you who are in Karma Fleet know Harry. He is procurement director. And it's just because the 4 of our names are on the director list. But all the other members of procurement is a very closely guarded secret. We don't tell anybody who that is. Tranquility, did you guys do the Typhoons for X47? Sure. I'll declassify that. Yes, we did. In fact, it was actually me. I built all of those. Yeah, I built like 99% of them. But yes, the Typhoons in X47, yes, that was a procurement operation. The Leshaks and the Stormbringers were as well. We did the Stormbringers that we're using, the Leshaks that we're doing, and then the Typhoons specifically that were built in DO6 for the X47 fight. Those were all done by procurement. Nice. Yeah, it was a really interesting, and Asher gave a really really nice breakdown on the X47 timer. I can't remember now if it was like on the meta show or if he did it on the fireside, but he was talking about how, we had basically 2 fleets of Typhoons there that did nothing but shoot the Keep Star. Those 2 fleets just shooting the Keep Star, that's all they did. And we still won, even though technically the enemy outnumbered our combat fleets, because we had 2 fleets shooting just the Keep Star. And it was those 2 Typhoon fleets, yeah. I have to admit, I missed that one because the timer on those was just terrible for me. It was always in the middle of the week when I had to work, so I wasn't actually able to get in on any of the X47 timers. John, what do you mean was it horrible just because of the amount of damage applied against you? Or, like again, I said I wasn't actually in that engagement.
No, the modules, the rep modules, just kept dying. They cycled once, and as soon as you wanted to apply another round, you had to actively deactivate them and reactivate them, so they would rep again.
Yeah, module cycling in tie-dye has always been a little hit or miss, especially once you get to sub 10%. It really gets tricky on that. It's something that you can use. I don't know that this would have made any difference to you, man, but something that you can try if they won't stop cycling, right? If you hit them red and they just keep cycling red, this is something that you see a lot with cap ships. Move it onto another module, and sometimes, like, you're dragging it to rearrange it on your control panel, and sometimes that will break whatever is causing that loop. Not what you're talking about there, but it's something that you might do, if they're cycling red and they won't stop cycling red.
Yeah, what also helps, just keep pressing those short keys.
Yeah, that's something that you have to be careful with that I found over my time is shortcut keys in heavy tie-dye is less reliable than dragging your mouse down and actually clicking the button. I've seen it where the hotkeys, right, your shortcut keys don't actually work in heavy tie-dye. Of course, I'll admit there's a lot of things that tend to break down in heavy tie-dye, but that's been my experience. They're not the best with that.
There's another interesting question. I heard about a corporation or an alliance that had the same initials as CCP. Is that true? They had to change it because CCP is not a corporation name, but it's the company's name.
So there is a CCP corporation in Eve, but it's controlled by CCP itself. It's the one like they do for the Plex for Good and all that kind of thing. So there is actually a CCP corporation in game. There's a CCP alliance as well, but it's controlled by CCP's devs, and they do the Plex for Good and stuff like that. That you
Yes, I know, but I know that too. Somewhere in Jove space, you can see the 5 little systems up there. No, I meant something else. I meant something that I heard one time. What did I think Metani talked about that one time?
I mean, it could be. I'm not familiar with it off the top of my head.
No cream, no quake, no pie, something like that. Something like I heard about that somebody made for fun CCP or something like that.
It wouldn't be the first time. I mean, it's not
Oh,
familiar
really?
to me, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I mean, people do things like that all the time. There's a parody Goon Swarm that we found, and it's hilarious. They've changed like the primary corporation's names by just a couple of letters, and it's actually really entertaining. Whoever put it together spent a lot of effort on it to entertain themselves, but I'll admit I think it's kind of funny too. So parody things you do see, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, the other thing is a hard one now. I don't want to point fingers, like I said. Was Goonswarm a better place with Metani as the CEO or afterwards?
That's always gonna. Whenever you get a leadership change, there's always going to be people who answer that on either side, right? There are people who like the way that Metani does things, and they want him back. There are people who like the way that Asher does things and are happy with the change.
Because many people, excuse me the interruption, because many my friends told me Goonswarm is not anymore Goonswarm because Metani is not there. They said that's why they left.
Sure. And so the people who left with that preferred it the way that Mittens did it. People who are here now it's a different thing. It's just like if you were to change the CEO at your corporation, right, that you work at in real life, and you don't like the new person that comes in, right? Or maybe you do like them, right? There's no difference with that. It's
because they said rushing from one war to the next one was the only way how they known to play in Eve.
I honestly don't know what they're talking about then, because if you look at the history of Goons, like under Metani, it wasn't like one war and then there was another war immediately after that. That was not the case. There was usually a period of peace in between it. That length of time for the peace varied, sure. Sometimes it was a few months, sometimes it was 6 months.
Yes.
But it's not constant. It wasn't like we were constantly at war. And the reason I know that is because I had to deal with a lot of drama, right, in peacetime. And so if we were constantly at war, that would not be the case, but it is. And so it's something. I mean, I've met Mittens. He came to Vegas. I've met him like as an actual person.
I never met him.
Yeah, it's a different piece, right? So, when you look and you say, was it better? Was this better with this person versus this person? Ask 10 people, you're going to get probably 8 different answers, right? Because some people like a certain way that Asher does things now. Some people like a certain way that Mittens used to do it before. It's like, okay.
I mean, does it even matter? I mean, our current leadership is putting in a lot of effort to provide us a community to have fun with and have fun in. So thanks for that. And we are simply not able to dial back time to create an old version of something.
Sure, that's the same, but there's something also, Conrad, when you look at it and you say, just because we are moving forward doesn't mean we can't look back and say, okay, this is what we need to carry forward with us, right? Not everything that Mittens did was bad. There were some things that he did that really were useful, and we still do them today. So looking back historically is never a bad thing, in my opinion. But it's a valid thing, right? So I sit here and go, do I like everything that Asher does? No. Do I like everything that Mittens did? No. Do I like both of them? Yeah, I do. But it's just the way it is.
They both put in a ton of work to provide us fun in a video game, period.
That's true. It's being head of Goonswarm and the Imperium, right? Because the difference between those two is basically irrelevant, is a tremendous amount of work. It's a tremendous amount of behind the scenes work that so many of you guys just don't see. And there's no way I can express it to you in strong enough terms as to how much Asher does that you guys never see, that you all are never aware of. He puts in a tremendous amount of time into our organization. And it's stuff that you all don't see because you're not in the directorate. You're not like high level FCs. You're not in, CD or, Corpse Diplo. You guys just don't see it, but he puts a tremendous amount of effort in.
Did Mitani did the same thing, or was he more like a like I heard an hands-off person?
No, Mittens did too. I mean, he put in a lot of effort. There's something that he would sit down and say, I have no idea how to do this. You guys solve it. But Asher does that too, right? Asher is not a production guy. That's why he has me. Asher's not a numbers guy. That's why he has Kaz, right?
Okay, I understand.
So it's that kind of thing. Asher knows he's not a finance guy. He's got a finance team. He's not a production guy. Asher doesn't build things, right? He's got a production team that does it. Tranquility, the hype that Mittens used to do became legendary, sure. We never do fleets after the fireside. That's not quite true, but I get your meaning on it, your context with that. We don't go to war right after the fireside.
Excuse me?
Oh, sorry about that. Had had a cough. It managed to mute my microphone. I couldn't unmute it. That was fun. Yeah, so the Asher fleets is, I think, one of the funniest stories. I think you guys will love this because it's a boat story. We talked about boat earlier.
Ah, yes.
I was on a fleet with Asher. Let's say we were using hacks because I don't remember, but it's probably a safe bet. We were somewhere, and I'm on the command channel with him. I was actually Logi anchor for this fleet. And I hear him key up and say, Boat, I want you to bomb my fleet. And there's a pause in the command channels. Well, everybody's like, is Asher serious about that? Boat replies, are you sure about that? And he said, yes. And Boat did it. He bombed the fuck out of our own fleet. Because what Asher had done is he had moved our fleet intermixed with the enemy fleet. And we needed an edge to knock them down a little bit. I think they were shield tanked and we were armor or something, right? We needed something to push them just a little bit, like clear out drones, do all those kind of things. And I'm sitting there and we're like, Asher, you're gonna kill like a quarter of our Logi wing because our Logi were in frigates at the time. Like a quarter of the Logi were in frigates. We only had a handful of cruiser Logi with us. We didn't have an entire group of them. And he said, yep, I know. I had ordered Boat to fire, and he did, and we won that engagement. But yeah, Asher actually had Boat bomb his own fleet and wiped out his lodging wing. Actually wiped out the lodging wing. But it gave us a tactical advantage in that fight. They got SRP. It's not like they didn't. But yeah. Sorry, guys, give me just a second. I got to ping about something. So yeah, those are those kind of stories and everything. So we've been going about an hour and a half. Let me do this. Anybody have any questions? If you got something, please type it in Fleet. I need to step away and go close the door to let the puppy dog, get the puppy dog back in. So just type it in Fleet, and I'll be right back.
Okay.
Okay, I'm back. John, why did GSF have Condi as the ticker? That comes from the cartoon era where it had to be the ticker had to be changed because he had the original Goons form stuff. So it comes from that point. The actual origin of why it was picked as Condi, I actually don't know the history of that one. And unfortunately, Kaz isn't here. But
I think it was an SA forum thing. No way, like Shoban. I think it's something like that.
It could be. Tranquility Condiment, yeah, I like it. I wouldn't be too surprised if that was the case.
I think the guy on the something awful forums was literally called Condiment, and it was something to do with him. That's why it's that. It's like the emote for flipping someone off or something like that.
That is totally on par with Goonswarm of that period of time. I could totally see that. Yeah, absolutely. It was like one of those things, I've been in nullsec now over 10 years doing things. I was, in the CFC and everything. But when I joined GSF itself, was after all of this had changed, and it's always been Condi to me. So it was because I formally joined GSF in like 2014 or something like that. Before that, I was in an Imperium Alliance, either FA or TNT. Yeah, those two.
There is also something that bugs me. Somebody told me one time you can come only into Goonswarm if you know somebody in real life that is a Goon.
So that's not.
That is the only way you can come into Goonswarm, because that is how I came into Goonswarm.
It's not quite true. At one point, you had to have somebody that, like, you had to have something awful forum account. That's where.
Yeah, that is something I never understood. What is that? That's something awful forum account. What exactly?
It's just a
forum.
Who exactly? It's like Reddit. It's just a forum. Yeah, it's just an online forum.
Really? Because they said bad people meet there. That's what they told me.
Yeah, it's. I think Nevis has got it right there. It's not the. It is the way that the internet was in like the early 2000s is still that way on SA now. So it's pretty cringe there.
SA.
Yeah, something awful. That's what.
Also something awful.
So you had to have like an SA account, or you had to know somebody who had an SA account because they're the original members of Goonswarm. That's not really true anymore, just because SA is not used like that. So you don't have to have an account there to do it. When I first looked to come back into nullsec in 2014 to join GSF, it was still a requirement then. And so I ended up joining a different corporation. They're called Wildly Inappropriate Dot. They actually had a dot at the end of their name. That corporation doesn't exist anymore. I mean, not really. Vatheron, what was that?
I was in Whiteout as well back in 2012.
Oh, yeah, I joined in. When am I trying to figure it out? I can just look on my character. Let me see.
Oh, not in this character. I stopped.
2014.
I stopped playing Eve for a long time, and then came back about 2 years ago.
Yeah, so I joined in 2014. Middle of 2014. It was literally July of 2014.
Was it Tomcat or Radek that had the redhead fling? Or that thing for redheads?
So the I think that was Tomcat, but I'm not for sure on that. Reddick,
I can't
Reddick
remember
never
which
said
one.
anything to me. I heard him speak once in the entire time I was there. And it was after we lost Deck and everybody was kind of panicking. I'd been made SRP guy for Weedot at that point in time. So I was in the command channels with Weedot, and we were all talking, and Radek decided to do a corp meeting. And it was so funny because I'd never heard him speak at all. And in Fleet right there is the picture of Boat with the keys that he kept getting yanked from him. That total disaster. That's it right there. That Nymphomane. Wow, your name is crazy, man. Nympha. I'm not even gonna try. Yeah, thanks.
Nymphetamine?
Yeah, that's it. It was something where to join like Weedot at the time, you had to have your own capital, you had to have sinos and do all that kind of stuff.
I had a friend who was in it and bypassed it all.
It was one of those, that's where it was when I joined it. And then it turned out that those rules were not quite as set in stone. And yeah, so, but yeah, Weedot technically does still exist. But the corporation is not in GSF anymore. I'm honestly not sure they're actually active. They were for a little while. They tried to kind of reconstitute themselves. But it
Oh,
was
really?
one of the, yeah, if they've got a Discord that was active for a little while, but it's been quiet for months.
So all I remember is the old forums.
Yeah, so it was interesting when I first joined. I knew that Radek was the CEO of Weedot, because it said that. But what I didn't realize at the time is that it wasn't Souls, because Souls was the guy who always talked to us. He was the one who was always talking to me. So I thought Radek was Souls' alt. It's not. It's two different people. But I never heard Radek talk because I always talked with Souls, right? He was the one who sent out the in-game emails. We still used in-game email at that point in time. He was the one who did all of that kind of stuff. And I didn't realize there were two different people for a long time when I was in there. Not even after I got made SRP guy, I still didn't realize it was two different people until I saw both of them in our Jabber channel one day, and I'm like, oh shit, this is actually two different people. I just thought Radek was Souls' like in-game alt, and he just had registered under Souls, but Radek was the name of his alt that he had as CEO, which is not unusual, right? I mean, if you look at Asher is not the CEO of the Alliance Executor Corp. That's just not. He uses Asher as a FC alt, so it's got access to FC hangers and all that kind of stuff. So having an alt of a different name in the CEO of a corporation is super common. All right, do we have any other questions? If not, I think we'll call it a day. We've been going over an hour and a half now.
It's not that late.
We actually have been going for an hour and a half. Yeah, we started at 1800.
Mm-hmm. Tired?
All right, guys. Thank you all for coming out. I think we'll call it a day. Again, I am going to post this, and we'll, once it renders and uploads and all that kind of stuff, we'll get that. Rachel, no pap for you. I saw that. We might do another one of these in a few weeks. I haven't decided yet.
Great.
We'll see. All right, you guys enjoy the rest of your Sunday, whatever you've got left, and I hope your Monday at work isn't too bad.
I'm mining Macoxic right now.
Cheers, man. Take care.
All right, yeah. Thanks for coming out, everybody. Have a good night, day, whatever your
Thank
time
you,
zone is.
thank you. Thank you for the nice talk. Was nice.